The snow hit Newcomb 3 days before I did, and nobody bothered clearing the station entrance. I had to shoulder the door twice to get it open, scraping a semicircle through the drift. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and wet wool. The radiator ticked in the corner, putting out just enough heat to make the windows sweat. My first winter assignment. 27 years old, 5 months out of the academy, and they sent me to the Adirondacks in January because someone had to take it, and I was the newest hire. That was pretty much it. The desk had my name on a piece of masking tape. Marshall. Someone had written it in Sharpie. Neat block letters. There was a filing cabinet next to it, a computer that looked about 15 years old, and a phone with 6 different lines. A laminated map of the High Peaks region covered most of the wall, marked up with pencil and highlighter. I figured I'd get to know it pretty well. The radio was already going. Voices came through every couple of minutes, mostly dispatch coordinating with rangers further south. I listened while I unpacked my duffel. Overdue hiker near Lake Colden, possible ankle injury on Algonquin. Someone's dog got loose at the trailhead and they wanted us to keep an eye out. Standard stuff, I thought. Christina Hughes showed up around 10. She was my supervisor, the one who'd called me twice before I drove up to make sure I actually owned insulated boots. She had dark hair pulled back tight and the kind of walk that made people get out of the way without her asking. "You made it," she said. "Yeah." Road wasn't too bad. Fine until Newcomb. Lot of ice on Route 28 North. She nodded, already moving past me to check the logbook. "You'll do a supply run to Lake Placid this afternoon. We need flares, batteries, and more propane for the portable heaters. I'll email you the list." "Okay." After that, I want last week's permits processed and filed. They're in the cabinet, second drawer. Someone was supposed to finish them before Christmas, but didn't. I said I'd handle it. She glanced at me then, just for a second. "Most of what we do here is paperwork between patrols. You good with that?" "Yeah." Because if you're expecting to run rescues every day, you're going to be disappointed. Most calls are people who twisted something, got lost because they didn't bring a map, or started a hike at 3 in the afternoon and surprised themselves by running out of daylight. I get it. Good. She pulled her jacket tighter. "I'm doing a loop to check trail conditions. Back by 4. Radio if anything urgent comes through." Then she was gone, and it was just me and the ticking radiator and the voices on the radio. I did the supply run first. Took the station truck down to Lake Placid, picked up everything on Christina's list plus an extra box of hand warmers because the price was decent. The guy at the outdoor supply shop asked if I was new, and I said yeah. He said winter up here wasn't bad if you respected it. I told him I would. Drove back, unloaded, started on the permits. They were backcountry camping requests, mostly. People who wanted to stay overnight in the wilderness zones where you had to register in advance. I read through them one by one, checking dates and group sizes, making sure nobody had written down something stupid like indefinite for their return date. A couple did. I marked those for Christina to review. It took about 2 hours. My back started to ache from the chair, which didn't have great support, and I kept getting up to stretch and look out the window. Just trees and snow, not a soul around. The radio kept going. Dispatch checked in with Rangers Torres and McKenzie. Someone called about a broken gate at a parking area. A woman wanted to know if the trails were safe for her kids and got transferred 3 times before someone answered her properly. I wanted to be out there. That was the truth of it. I didn't join DC to sit at a desk and process forms. But Christina was right. Most of the job was this: waiting, maintaining, keeping things running so that when something did happen, we were ready. Still bugged me a little. Around 3, someone knocked. I got up and opened the door. The guy standing there was tall, maybe 6'1", with long black hair tied back and a face that looked like it spent a lot of time outside. His jacket was old but good quality, technical fabric that had seen some miles. He had a pack slung over one shoulder. "Help you?" I said. Glenn Reed, say our liaison. Christina around? Out on patrol. Back by 4. He nodded and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, which I guess was fine since he clearly knew the place. He set his pack down carefully and pulled off his gloves. That's when I saw the scars, old burns looked like, across the backs of his hands and up along his neck. Not fresh, but prominent. You're the new guy, he said. Tommy Marshall. Right. He moved to the map on the wall, studying it for a minute. Then he pulled a pen from his pocket and made a small mark near one of the trails. Another further west. He didn't explain. What are those? I asked. Notes. About what? He glanced at me. His eyes were dark, hard to read. Old burn sites. Places where fires went through years back. Wildlife patterns shift around them. Okay. Gets cold like this, animals get desperate. They come down lower, move into places they wouldn't normally go. I waited, but he didn't add anything else. Just kept looking at the map. You warning me about bears? I said. Among other things. I've got an air horn, and Christina said most of the bears are hibernating by now anyway. Most are? He marked another spot, this one closer to the station. Cold like this wakes things up sometimes. Hunger does that. It felt like folklore. The kind of thing locals tell new rangers to see if they'll spook. I'd heard plenty of it at the academy. Ghost stories about the backcountry, animals that supposedly tracked hikers for miles, weird sounds that nobody could explain. It was always exaggerated. I'll keep an eye out, I said, trying to be polite. Glenn capped his pen and turned away from the map. You do that. He stayed another 20 minutes, pulling out some kind of portable speaker from his pack and checking the batteries. White noise machine, he said when I asked. Used them on night searches to block out distractions. Seemed like overkill to me, but I didn't say so. Christina got back at 4:15. She and Glenn talked in the corner for a while, voices low, and I went back to the permits. I heard her say something about conditions being stable for now, and him saying something about checking again in a week. Then he left. He always liked that. I asked after the door closed. Like what? Cryptic. Christina almost smiled. Glenn's careful. Pays attention to things most people don't. You'll work with him eventually. He knows the backcountry better than anyone. He was marking burn sites on the map, said animals get hungry in the cold. They do. Seemed like he was trying to spook me. She looked at me for a second, then shrugged. Glenn doesn't joke around much. If he tells you something, he means it. I let it drop. The rest of the day was quiet. I finished the permits, updated the call log, checked the equipment inventory. Christina made another pot of coffee and we went over the patrol schedule for the next 2 weeks. I'd be doing trailhead checks mostly and helping with any calls that came in close to Newcomb. She'd handle the longer routes until I knew the area better. The radio chatter picked up again around 6. Another overdue hiker, this time near Marcy Dam. A ranger further east was heading out to check. Possible frostbite case at the lodge. Dispatch coordinating with local EMS. I listened, one hand resting near the truck keys on my desk. Christina noticed. You'll get your chance. I know. Most of it's going to be easy stuff. Blisters, mild hypothermia, someone who didn't pack enough food. I know, I said again, but I wanted it anyway. The call, the dispatch, the radio crackling with coordinates and urgency. I wanted to be the one driving out with the lights on, med kit in the passenger seat, moving fast because someone needed help and I was close enough to give it. That was why I joined. The sun dropped fast. By 7 it was full dark, and the temperature outside hit 12 degrees. Christina turned up the radiator and pulled the blinds. The windows had frost creeping in from the edges, little patterns that looked almost deliberate. The radio kept going. Voices checking in, calling out, coordinating. I sat at my desk and watched the phone lines, waiting for one of them to light up. Something was building. I couldn't say what or why, but the station felt like it was holding its breath. Maybe it was just me, restless and new and wanting to prove I belonged here. Maybe it was the cold pressing in from outside, or the way Glenn had marked those burned sites without explaining, or the static that crept into the radio every time someone transmitted from the northern zones. I didn't know, but I kept the air horn clipped to my belt, and I kept my eyes on the map, and I waited for whatever was coming next. The call came through on my 8th day. I'd gotten comfortable by then. Comfortable probably isn't the right word. Used to it, maybe. The routine of trailhead checks, the smell of burnt coffee that never quite left the station, the way Christina would check the weather 3 times before deciding anything. I'd stopped expecting drama. Most of our work was boring in the good way. Paperwork, supply runs, hikers with blisters who just needed a ride back to their car. Jerry Salinas called in around 2:30 p.m. I recognized his voice from the intro Christina had done earlier that week. Older guy, trailhead steward up at the Adirondack Lodge near Lake Placid. He handled parking, checked permits, kept an eye on who came back and who didn't. "Got too overdue," he said. His voice had that upstate cadence, slow and deliberate. Taylor Coleman and River Campbell signed out for a loop toward Indian Pass this morning, said they'd be back by noon. It's past 2 now, and the lot's almost empty. Christina was already pulling the map down, spreading it across the desk. "What time did they leave?" 7:45, maybe 8. "I've got their permit here, said they were experienced, had snowshoes and layers. But that's a 6-hour loop in good conditions, and we've got maybe 2 hours of decent light left." I watched Christina's face. She didn't look panicked. She looked like she was doing math in her head, calculating daylight and temperature and trail distance. "All right," she said. "We'll do a hasty search. If they're just moving slow, we'll intercept them before dark." Jerry confirmed and signed off. Christina turned to me. "You're going with Glenn. He's already geared up. He was here earlier dropping off trail reports." That surprised me a little. I hadn't seen Glenn come in, but he had a habit of moving quietly. Christina was already on her phone, probably texting him. "Grab the rescue sled from the shed," she said. "Extra batteries, blankets, the med kit with the orange tape. I'll load coordinates into the GPS." I didn't ask questions, just moved. The shed was behind the station, padlocked with a combination Christina had made me memorize on day 2. Inside it smelled like canvas and cold metal. The rescue sled was a rigid plastic thing, bright red with handles and tie-downs. I dragged it out along with a duffel full of emergency supplies and a nylon bag stuffed with wool blankets. By the time I got back to the truck, Glenn was already there, his pack on, checking the straps on his snowshoes. He nodded at me, didn't say anything. Christina handed me the GPS unit and a radio. "Main channel. I'll coordinate from here and meet you if we need more hands. Jerry's plowing the access road as far as he can, but you'll probably have to hike the last mile or 2. "Got it," I said. Glenn climbed into the passenger seat. I took the wheel. Christina knocked twice on the hood and we pulled out. The drive took 40 minutes. Route 73 was clear until we hit the turnoff for the lodge. Then the pavement turned to packed snow with tire ruts frozen into uneven ridges. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. Glenn didn't talk. He just watched the trees, his head turning slightly every so often like he was cataloging something. We passed 2 other vehicles, both empty, parked at pullouts. Probably day hikers who'd gotten back before the cold really set in. The sun was already starting to drop, turning everything pale orange and blue. The road ended at a snowbank taller than the truck's hood. Someone had plowed up to this point and then stopped. Probably Jerry. I could see the plow's scrape marks in the snow. "Here," Glenn said. I killed the engine. The temperature had dropped to maybe 15 degrees. I pulled on my parka, checked the belt clip for my air horn, and grabbed my pack. Glenn was already out, pulling the sled free from the truck bed. He clipped it to a harness he'd rigged and tested the drag with one smooth pull. "You take point," he said. "I'll manage the sled." I nodded and clicked on my headlamp even though we still had some daylight. Better to have it ready. Glenn did the same, then checked his radio. I heard the squelch as he cycled through channels. "Set to main," he said. I checked mine. Same. Good here. We started up the road. It wasn't technically a road anymore, just a wide corridor of snow between trees, tire ruts visible under a fresh inch of powder. My boots crunched. The sled hissed behind us as Glenn dragged it. The air was so cold, it made my teeth ache if I breathed too deep. I kept my pace steady, fast enough to cover ground, slow enough not to burn out. Glenn matched me without effort. The guy moved like he'd done this 1,000 times. Probably had. Halfway up, maybe 20 minutes in, my radio crackled. "Marshall, Reed, this is Hughes. I've got updated coordinates from Jerry. He found their entry point on the trail register. Sending now." I stopped and pulled the GPS unit from my pocket. Glenn stopped too, turning slightly to watch me. But the GPS didn't update. I waited. Nothing. "Did you get that?" I said, glancing at Glenn. He pulled his own handheld radio from his chest strap and checked it. His face didn't change much, but his eyes narrowed. He held the screen toward me. The frequency was quiet. No transmission indicator. No static. Nothing. "That's weird," I said. Then the radio crackled again. "Coordinates confirmed," Christina's voice said. "You should see a split in the road near a downed birch. Take the left fork." I looked at Glenn. His radio was still silent. No light, no activity. Mine was transmitting or something was coming through, but his wasn't picking it up. "Check your battery," I said. He didn't answer, just tilted his head slightly, listening. Then my radio crackled a third time. "Marshall here," my own voice said. "We just passed the downed birch. Left fork confirmed. There's a marker post about 50 yards up with red tape." I stopped breathing for a second. That was my voice. Exact tone, exact cadence. But I hadn't said it. I hadn't keyed the mic. I looked down at my glove, at the push-to-talk clipped to my chest strap. I hadn't touched it. Glenn's eyes were on me now, steady, waiting. I pulled off my glove and checked the mic. The connection was solid. I pressed the push-to-talk and spoke. "Hughes, this is Marshall. Radio check. Static." Then Christina's voice. "Copy, Marshall. You're clear." "Did you hear another transmission just now?" I said. "Someone using my call sign." Pause. Longer than it should have been. "Negative," Christina said. "Last transmission was me sending coordinates. You're the first response." I looked at Glenn. He shook his head once. Slow. I let go of the push-to-talk and just stood there. The cold pressed in. My breath fogged. The sled sat silent on the snow behind us. "Keep moving," Glenn said quietly. I wanted to argue, wanted to check the radio again, cycle through channels, verify something. But Glenn was already pulling the sled forward and the light was dropping fast. I started walking, but I kept the radio on. Kept listening. My brain was trying to make sense of it. Maybe a bounce signal, maybe another ranger further out using the same frequency, maybe some kind of equipment malfunction. None of it fit right. The voice had been exact, not similar. Exact. I checked my mic twice more as we hiked. Checked the clip. Checked my gloves to make sure I hadn't brushed the talk button by accident. Nothing explained it. Glenn didn't say anything, didn't ask. Just kept pace behind me, the sled scraping steady through the snow. We reached the start of the loop, maybe 10 minutes later. There was a wooden sign, weathered and half buried, with trail names carved into it. Indian Pass to the left. Someone had tied red flagging tape to a branch nearby, fluttering in the wind. I stopped and scanned the snow. Boot prints, maybe a day old. Snowshoe tracks leading off into the trees. Glenn pulled up beside me and crouched, studying the tracks without touching them. 2 people. he said, heading in. I nodded. My hand stayed near my radio. The strangeness from earlier hadn't left. It sat in my chest, tight and cold, and I couldn't shake it. The trees ahead looked darker than they should have. The wind had picked up. Somewhere far off, I thought I heard something. Maybe a voice, maybe just branches scraping. Glenn stood and adjusted his pack. Stay close, he said. I clicked my headlamp to full beam and started down the trail. I saw it maybe 10 feet past the trailhead marker. A snowshoe. Just one. Lying on its side in the snow with the binding snapped clean through, not torn or frayed, but broken straight across like someone stepped wrong and the whole thing gave out. Glenn stopped beside me. He didn't say anything. I crouched down and looked at it without touching. The binding was new enough that the edges of the break were still sharp, no weathering. Fresh. Today, probably. Maybe yesterday at the oldest. Next to it, cutting away from the trail and into the trees, was a drag mark. Not a footprint. Not a slide where someone sat down. A drag mark. Wide and uneven. Carving through the snow in a line that went straight into a stand of tight spruces about 20 yards off the trail. And along the edge of it, every few feet, were small dark droplets. Blood. I stood up fast. My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Glenn was already looking at the trees. He tilted his head, same way he did back on the road when my radio went strange. Listening, I keyed my radio. Hughes, this is Marshall. We're at the loop start. We've got a broken snowshoe and a drag mark heading off trail with what looks like blood. We're going in. Static for a second. Then Christina's voice came through clear. Copy that. Keep me updated. I'm en route to your position now. I clipped the radio back and looked at Glenn. You good to leave the sled here? He nodded once, unclipped the harness and let it drop into the snow. Then he pulled something from his pack. One of those white noise machines he'd been messing with at the station. He turned it on, checked it, then turned it back off and clipped it to his belt. I didn't ask. I went in first. The drag mark was obvious enough that I didn't need to think about it. Just followed the trench through the snow, stepping carefully to the side so I wouldn't mess up whatever was there. The blood droplets kept appearing, small ones. Not a gush or a pool, just little specks every few feet, like someone was bleeding but not hemorrhaging. The trees were tight, spruces with branches that hung low and scraped my shoulders as I pushed through. My headlamp beam kept catching on bark and snow, throwing shadows everywhere. I kept my hand near my air horn. Didn't know why exactly. Just felt better. Behind me I could hear Glenn moving, steady, quiet. But every few seconds he'd stop, and I'd hear him breathing slow and controlled. And then he'd start again. I wanted to go faster. The idea that someone might still be alive out here bleeding and alone made waiting unbearable. But the snow was deep and the branches kept grabbing at my parka, and I had to focus on not tripping over roots I couldn't see. The drag mark bent to the right, then it straightened out again. The blood was more frequent now, still just droplets but closer together. I pushed through another set of branches and almost stepped on a broken limb. Then another. The snow here was churned up, disturbed in a wide, messy area like something had thrashed around or been hauled through without care. The drag mark turned into a shallow trench, wider than before, deeper, and the branches around it were snapped off at chest height, some of them hanging by splinters. It didn't look like someone had walked through here and collapsed. It looked like something heavy had been hauled, dragged deliberately. That thought sat wrong in my head, but I didn't stop moving. Glenn was right behind me now, close enough that I could hear his breathing. He still wasn't saying anything. The trench went another 15 feet, curving slightly left, and then it just stopped. I swept my headlamp across the area and saw him, a guy, slumped against a log with his legs bent awkwardly to one side and his head tilted forward like he'd passed out mid-sentence. His jacket was torn at the shoulder. His gloves were gone, and his hands were a mess. Scraped raw, fingers red and swollen, the skin around his knuckles torn up and bleeding in places, like he'd been clawing at something. Fighting. His boots were scuffed to hell, the toes gouged and the laces half undone. I moved fast, dropped to a knee beside him and pulled off my glove so I could check for a pulse at his neck. Skin was cold but not frozen. Pulse was there, slow but steady. "Hey," I said, louder than I meant to. "Hey, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, pale blue, bloodshot. He blinked twice, slow, and then his head rolled a little to the side and he looked right at me. "Tommy," he said. I froze. "Tommy Marshall," he said again. His voice was rough, like his throat was raw, but the words were clear, deliberate. I hadn't told him my name, hadn't said anything except, "Hey, what's your name?" I asked, kept my voice calm. "Procedural. Can you tell me your name?" "Taylor," he said. Then he coughed. It sounded wet. "Taylor Coleman. Rivers, she's calling. You hear her?" I glanced back at Glenn. He was standing about 5 feet behind me, facing the trees instead of Taylor. His hand was on his belt near the white noise machine. "Where's River?" I asked, turned back to Taylor. "Where'd you last see her?" "Ridge," Taylor said. He lifted one of his ruined hands and pointed vaguely to the left. "She's calling. She keeps calling." I tried to get to her, but his sentence bent, stopped, then started again in a way that didn't quite connect. "Tommy Marshall," he said. "That's you. You came. I knew you'd come." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not grateful, not relieved, just stating a fact. Like he'd been expecting me specifically. "How do you know my name?" I asked. He smiled, just a little. His lips were chapped and cracked, and the smile didn't reach his eyes. "River told me," he said. Then he laughed, short and sharp. "She said Tommy Marshall's coming." She said it 3 times. "Tommy Marshall, Tommy Marshall, Tommy Marshall." I looked at his hands again, the raw skin, the torn up knuckles, the way his boots were scuffed like he'd been dragged backward through the snow while trying to dig his heels in. "Who dragged you here?" I asked. Taylor blinked, tilted his head. "Nobody dragged me." "Your boots are trashed. Your hands look like you fought someone." I was trying to reach her. His voice went tight, frustrated. "She kept calling and I kept trying, but the snow kept pulling and I couldn't." He stopped, stared at me. Then he said my name again. "Tommy." Not a question, just my name, flat. Glenn moved. I heard his boots crunch in the snow, and then he was beside me, crouched low, looking at Taylor's face instead of his injuries. "Where's River now?" Glenn asked. His voice was calm, quiet. Taylor's eyes shifted to him, blinked slow. "Ridge, she's calling. You hear her?" "No," Glenn said. "She's calling," Taylor said again, insistent now. "She keeps saying help. She keeps saying Tommy." I checked Taylor's pupils, both reactive, no obvious dilation. But something about the way he was talking felt off, looping, like he couldn't quite finish a thought before circling back to my name or River's voice. "We're going to get you out of here," I said. Pulled my radio. "Hughes, this is Marshall. We found Taylor Coleman. He's alive, conscious but disoriented. Possible hypothermia and hand injuries. We're bringing him back to the sled now." Christina's voice crackled back. "Copy. What about River Campbell?" I looked at Taylor. "Where's River?" "Calling," he said. "Ridge, you hear her?" "We don't have a visual on River yet," I said into the radio. "Taylor says she's on a ridge, but he's not making full sense. We'll extract him first and reassess." "Copy," Christina said. "I'm 10 minutes out." I clipped the radio and started checking Taylor's legs for breaks. Everything seemed intact, cold but not frostbitten. His jacket was torn, but the layers underneath were still dry. Glenn stood up. He wasn't looking at Taylor anymore. He was looking at the trees again, head tilted, and his hand was on that white noise machine. "We need to move," Glenn said. "I'm checking him first," I said. "Now," Glenn said. His voice didn't change, still calm, but there was weight behind it. I looked up at him. His eyes were scanning the tree line in slow sweeps, left to right, and his jaw was tight. "What is it?" I asked. "We need to move," he said again. Taylor laughed, short and sharp, same as before. "Tommy Marshall," he said. "River said you'd come. She said it exactly right." I pulled Taylor's arm over my shoulder and hauled him up. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight leaning into me, but he got his feet under him enough to shuffle. Glenn moved in on the other side and took Taylor's other arm without a word. We started back through the trees. Faster than I wanted to go with someone in Taylor's condition, but Glenn set the pace and I matched it. Taylor kept talking, mumbling mostly. My name twice more. River's name. Something about the snow pulling. Something about her voice. I kept my eyes on the drag mark we'd followed in, retracing it step by step, and I didn't look at the trees, but I wanted to, because Glenn kept glancing at them, and his hand never left that white noise machine. Chapter 4. Heard the snowmobile before I saw it. The engine cut through the quiet maybe 30 seconds before Christina appeared around the bend, headlamp bouncing with the terrain. She had the bigger Yamaha, the one we kept for heavy hauls, and she'd strapped a hard case med kit across the back along with what looked like the station's backup radio unit, the one with the external antenna. She killed the engine and swung off in one motion. "Status." "Conscious," I said. "Disoriented. Hands are torn up. Possible hypothermia. He keeps talking about River calling from a ridge." Christina moved past me and crouched next to Taylor. She set the med kit down, popped it open, and pulled out a pen light. "Taylor, I'm Christina. I'm a ranger. Can you tell me where it hurts?" Taylor blinked at her, slow. His lips were cracked, and his face had that waxy look people get when their core temp drops. "River," he said. "She's calling." "We'll find River," Christina said. She checked his pupils with the pen light, then his hands, turning them over carefully. The knuckles were bad, torn skin, some of it down to raw meat. She pulled a foil blanket from the kit and draped it over his shoulders. "Tommy, get some heat packs on him. Core and extremities." I dug into my pack and found the hand warmers I'd bought extra of back on my supply run. Shook 4 of them to activate and tucked 2 inside Taylor's jacket at his ribs, 1 in each armpit. Christina wrapped his hands in gauze while I worked. Glenn stood about 10 feet back, watching the trees. He hadn't said anything since Christina arrived. After a second, he turned and started gathering deadfall from the edge of the clearing. Branches, mostly. Some of them still had snow clumped on the ends. "What's he doing?" Christina asked. "Not sure." Glenn came back with an armful of wood and dropped it in a rough pile between us and the tree line. He crouched and started arranging it, building something. "Read," Christina said. "We're moving in 2 minutes." "Fire first," Glenn said. He didn't look up. "We don't have time for fire and noise." Glenn pulled a lighter from his pocket. "Then we move." Christina stood. He's hypothermic and losing blood from his hands. We get him to the sled, we get him out, and we meet the ambulance at the access road. That's the protocol. Protocol doesn't cover this. Cover what? Glenn didn't answer. He got the lighter going and held it to a dry piece of bark until it caught. The flame spread fast, crackling as it hit the smaller twigs. I focused on Taylor, checked his pulse again. Still slow, still steady. His breathing was shallow but even. The heat packs were doing their job. I could feel warmth starting to build under the foil blanket. Christina pulled the backup radio off her belt and keyed it. Hughes to dispatch. Come in. Static for a second, then a voice. Clear. Flat. Dispatch. Go ahead. This is Hughes. We have one subject located and secured. Requesting ambulance intercept at Low J Access Road. Coordinates. She rattled off the GPS numbers. ETA 20 minutes. Copy that, Hughes. Ambulance is en route. ETA 18 minutes to Access Road. Confirmed. Hughes out. She clipped the radio back and looked at me. Let's get him on the sled. I nodded. Started to stand. Then I stopped. The reply had been too fast and too clean. We'd been fighting reception all the way in. My radio had picked up Christina earlier, but Glenn's had stayed silent. And that voice I'd heard, my own voice, the one I hadn't spoken, had come through garbled and distant, the way transmissions do when they're bouncing off ridges or pushing through dense tree cover. But Francis, the dispatcher, had come through perfect. No static, no delay, just clean audio, like he was standing 10 feet away instead of coordinating from a console 40 miles out. I pulled my radio off my belt and checked the signal indicator. 2 bars, weak but functional. Tommy? I looked at Christina. That came through really clear. Good equipment, she said. Let's move. Yeah. I clipped the radio back. Yeah, okay. But it didn't sit right. We got Taylor onto the sled. Christina and I lifted while Glenn steadied the frame, and we strapped him in with the nylon harnesses across his chest and thighs. Taylor didn't fight it. He just kept mumbling. River's name, mostly. Sometimes mine. Glenn clipped back into the sled harness, and I took point again. Christina followed behind with her hand on the medkit strapped to her belt. The fire Glenn had built was still going, small and contained, throwing orange light across the snow. We started back down the trail. The drag mark was still there, cutting through the snow to our left. I kept my eyes on the path ahead and tried to match the pace I'd set on the way in. Steady, controlled. Don't rush and don't stop. The woods were quiet, not normal quiet, not the kind you get in winter when the snow muffles everything and the animals bed down. This was different. No wind, no branches creaking, no distant sound of anything moving or settling or existing. Just our boots crunching through snow and the sled scraping behind us and our breathing. I checked my watch. 16 minutes since Christina's call. We were making good time. The ambulance would be there. Francis had confirmed it. 18-minute ETA, and we were moving fast enough to beat that if we didn't stop. Then I heard it. Crying. A woman's voice, thin and high and broken, calling out in short, gasping sobs. It was ahead of us, maybe 50 yards up the trail, past the next bend. River? Christina said. She stepped forward, past me, headlamp swinging toward the sound. The crying came again. Louder this time. Clearer. Too clear. The trees should have muffled it. Should have scattered the sound, made it hard to pin down. But this came through clean and direct, like it was being piped in through a speaker. Glenn stopped. The sled jerked to a halt behind him. Don't, he said. Christina kept walking. River, we're here. Stay where you are. We're coming to you. The crying shifted, changed pitch slightly, still high, still broken, but now it sounded closer, right around the bend. Glenn dropped the sled harness and moved, fast. He grabbed Christina's arm and yanked her back hard enough that she stumbled. Hey! Don't move toward it, Glenn said. His voice was low and tight. Don't respond. That's River Campbell. That's not River. Christina jerked her arm free. She's 50 yards ahead and she's in distress. We have a duty. It's bait. I stepped between them. We don't have time for this. Glenn looked at me. His face was blank, but his hand was on the white noise machine clipped to his belt. Every second we stand here is a second Taylor's core temp drops, I said. We extract him, we come back for river with more people and better light. That's the call. Listen to it, Glenn said. The crying came again. Same pitch, same rhythm, same breaks between sobs, identical. She's hypothermic, Christina said. She's in shock. People loop when they're... It's a loop, Glenn said. Exactly. I grabbed Glenn's shoulder and pulled him back toward the sled. We're moving, now. He didn't fight me, just let himself be pulled, his eyes still locked on the trees ahead. I picked up the harness Glenn had dropped and clipped it to my own belt. Christina, stay close. Glenn, watch the rear. I started walking. The crying followed us. The crying followed us around the next bend. Then it stopped. Just cut off mid-sob. No fade, no trailing breath. 1 second it was there. The next it wasn't. I kept pulling the sled. My boots crunched through snow. The harness dug into my belt and my headlamp beam swung across trees and packed trail ahead. The silence felt worse than the crying. Made the air feel heavier. Made every step feel like I was pushing through something thicker than cold. My beam caught something dark ahead, hanging, wrong shape for a branch. I stopped. The sled jerked behind me. Christina nearly walked into my back. Marshall, she said. What? I pointed. 10 feet ahead, maybe 12. A deer carcass hung from a low branch. Not tied, not snagged, hanging. The branch bowed under the weight, but didn't break. The deer's belly was split open from sternum to pelvis in one clean line, and steam rose from the cavity in slow, pale curls that caught my headlamp and glowed. The ribs were pulled apart. Most of the organs were gone. What was left looked dark and wet and still warm enough to fog the air. The snow underneath was barely disturbed. A few drops of blood, maybe. Not enough for a kill site. Not enough for a gutting. Christina stepped beside me. Her light joined mine on the carcass. She didn't say anything for 3 seconds. That's fresh, she said. I nodded. Fresh was an understatement. That deer had been alive 5 minutes ago, maybe less. The steam was still rising, steady and thick, the kind you only get when something's body temperature warm and the air's cold enough to pull the heat right out. Where's the rest of it? I said. Christina's light swept the ground. No drag marks, no tracks leading to or from the carcass. Just snow and the deer and that single branch bending under weight it shouldn't be holding. Glenn moved up beside us. His light added to ours. He looked at the deer for 2 seconds, then looked past it into the trees. Keep moving, he said. That was just killed, Christina said. I know. So where's whatever killed it? Glenn didn't answer. He turned and walked back toward the sled, checking the straps on Taylor's chest harness and adjusting the foil blanket. I looked at the deer again. The edges of the split were too clean. No tearing, no jagged cuts. It looked surgical. It looked intentional. My stomach felt cold. Behind us, Taylor started laughing. It wasn't loud, wasn't wild, just a low, steady chuckle that came out in rhythm, like he was hearing the punchline to a joke only he could hear. The kind of laugh you'd hear at a bar or a dinner table, casual and easy, except Taylor was strapped to a rescue sled with hypothermia and torn hands, and we were standing in front of a steaming deer carcass in the middle of the woods. The laugh didn't fit his injuries, didn't fit the situation. Didn't fit the way he'd been mumbling and looping 5 minutes ago. I turned. My headlamp caught Taylor's face. His eyes were half open, unfocused, staring up at nothing. His mouth was moving. The laugh kept coming, steady and even, no breaks for breath. Christina moved past me toward the sled. Taylor, she said, can you hear me? The laugh continued. Same rhythm, same tone. I tightened my grip on the rope clipped to my harness. The nylon bit into my glove. My teeth felt too tight in my jaw. We need to move, Christina said. She didn't look at Taylor. She looked at me. Her voice was clipped and flat, the way it got when she was giving orders she didn't want questioned. "Now, Marshall, pull." I pulled. The sled scraped forward. Taylor's laughter didn't change, didn't get louder or softer, didn't speed up or slow down. Just kept going in that same low, even rhythm as we moved past the hanging deer and down the trail. Glenn walked beside the sled now, not behind it. His hand stayed on the white noise machine clipped to his belt. His eyes swept the trees in steady passes, left to right, up and down. 30 feet past the deer, Glenn stopped. "Hold," he said. I stopped. The sled jerked. Taylor's laugh kept going. Glenn unclipped his pack and set it down carefully. He opened the top flap and pulled out 2 more white noise machines. Small black rectangles, each about the size of a deck of cards, with a single switch on the side. He turned the first one on. A static hiss filled the air, low and constant, the kind of sound that sits right at the edge of annoying. He set it down on a flat rock beside the trail, then walked 10 feet to the right and placed the second one on a fallen log. "What are you doing?" Christina said. Glenn didn't answer. He pulled the third machine from his belt, walked 15 feet up the trail past where I was standing, and set it on a stump. Then he flipped the switch. The hiss tripled, layered. It filled the air from 3 directions, a constant wash of white noise that made my teeth itch and my jaw clench. It wasn't loud exactly, just present, persistent. The kind of sound that gets inside your ears and stays there. Taylor's laughter cut off, just stopped, mid-breath, like someone had pressed mute. I turned and looked at him. His mouth was still open, his chest was still rising and falling, but no sound came out. His eyes stayed unfocused, staring up at nothing, but the laugh was gone. Christina looked at Glenn. "What did you just do?" Glenn walked back to his pack and clipped it on. "Noise helps," he said. "Blocks it out." "Blocks what out?" He didn't answer. He picked up the rope I'd dropped and handed it back to me. "Keep moving. Don't stop until we hit the access road." I took the rope. My hand was shaking a little. I blamed the cold. We started walking again. The white noise followed us from behind, fading slowly as we put distance between us and the machines. My teeth still itched. My jaw still felt too tight, but Taylor stayed quiet. 20 feet later, I saw the tracks. They were off to the left, maybe 6 feet from the trail edge, running parallel to the path we were taking. Long impressions in the snow, deep enough that my headlamp caught the shadow inside each one. They weren't boot prints, weren't snowshoe prints. They were too narrow, too long and spaced too far apart. 4 points at the front of each track, pointed, sharp-edged. They looked like hoof prints at first glance, but the spacing was wrong. The depth was wrong, and hooves don't leave claw marks. "Christina," I said. She'd already seen them. Her light was locked on the tracks, following them forward into the dark where they disappeared past the range of our headlamps. "Moose," she said. I looked at her. She didn't look at me. "That's a sick moose," she said. Her voice was steady, practical. The same tone she used when explaining patrol schedules or supply runs. Moose get sick, their gait changes. CWD, injury, infection. They drag their hooves differently, leave different prints. Her light stayed on the tracks. She didn't blink. Glenn made a sound that might have been a laugh if Glenn laughed. "That's not a moose," he said. Christina's jaw tightened. "Then what is it?" "Don't know." "Then how do you know it's not a moose?" Glenn stopped walking. I stopped. The sled stopped. Taylor stayed silent on the sled, eyes half open, staring at nothing. Glenn looked at Christina. His face was blank, calm. The same expression he'd had when he yanked her back from the crying, when he'd stared at the hanging deer, when he'd set the white noise machines without explaining. "Because moose don't listen to radios," he said. Christina stared at him. What? Something out here listens, Glenn said. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the trees. Listens to radios, learns voices, plays them back. My stomach dropped. The transmission. My own voice, saying words I hadn't said, giving details I hadn't reported, coming through my radio clear and exact while Glenn stayed silent. That was bait, I said. Glenn nodded once. The coordinates Christina sent, I said. The update about the downed birch in the left fork, that wasn't her. Probably was, Glenn said. First transmission, but the second one, the one with your voice. He looked at me. That wasn't you. I thought about the timing, how fast it had come through, how precise it was, how it had used my name, my cadence, my exact tone. It was trying to separate us, I said. Glenn nodded again. Christina's hand moved to her radio. She pulled it off her belt and stared at the screen. 2 bars. Channel 3. Her thumb hovered over the push-to-talk button, then pulled back. The ambulance, she said. Dispatch confirmed 18 minutes. That was... She checked her watch. That was clear. Too clear. Yeah, Glenn said. So we don't know if an ambulance is actually coming. No. The cold pressed in closer. My headlamp beam felt smaller. The darkness past the light felt heavier, thicker, like it was paying attention, like it was listening. I looked at the tracks again. 4 clawed points, too deep, too deliberate, running parallel to us, keeping pace. It knows we're here, I said. Glenn adjusted his pack. It's known since we got off the truck. Then why hasn't it... I stopped. I didn't want to finish the question. Glenn finished it for me. Because it's playing. He started walking. I followed. Christina followed. The sled scraped through snow. Taylor stayed silent, eyes open, staring at nothing. The tracks stayed with us. 6 feet to the left, parallel, steady. And somewhere past the edge of my headlamp beam, I felt something cold and patient watching us move. Taylor stopped breathing around the 5-minute mark. I noticed it first. His chest just quit moving. The foil blanket stayed still. Christina dropped to her knees beside the sled and pressed 2 fingers against his throat, held them there for 10 seconds, then moved them to his wrist. She waited another 10. Nothing, she said. Glenn didn't stop watching the trees. Christina looked at the straps across Taylor's chest and thighs. Her hand moved to the buckle on the chest strap, hovered there. I knew what she was thinking. Dead weight slows us down. The sled's harder to pull. We're still a mile out, maybe more, and something's pacing us in the dark. I didn't say anything. Neither did Glenn. It was her call. She pulled her hand back and stood up. We keep moving. I grabbed the rope again. That's when Taylor's mouth opened. Not like a breath, not like a gasp, just opened. Slow and smooth, jaw-dropping until I could see the dark space inside. And then a voice came out. A kid's voice. Mom? High and soft, maybe 9 years old, clear as anything. Mom, please come home. I'm waiting. Christina went rigid. Her headlamp beam stopped moving. She said, Diego. The voice came again. Same exact tone. Same exact phrasing. Mom, please come home. She took a step forward, not toward the sled, toward the trees. Her hand dropped away from her belt and her shoulders tilted like she was leaning into something. I didn't think. I just moved. I hit her from the side, full body weight, and we went down together into the snow between 2 of Glenn's white noise machines. The hiss was loud enough to make my teeth ache. Christina thrashed once, tried to sit up, then stopped. Her eyes refocused. She looked at me, then at the sled, then back at me. That wasn't... She started. No, I said. Glenn was already moving. He dragged a pile of deadfall from the clearing edge and dumped it in the middle of the trail, then pulled 2 road flares from Christina's med kit. He cracked one, held it to the wood, and the bark caught fast. Flames spread orange and bright, throwing shadows that jumped and twisted across the snow. I stood up and pulled Christina with me. Her legs were shaky, but she stayed upright. "We need a choke point," Glenn said. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking past the fire into the trees. "Somewhere we can control the approach, burn, plan, and fall back." Christina shook her head. "We hike out, now. Fire gives us light and keeps it back, but we don't stop." Glenn turned. "You want to run in the dark with that thing tracking us?" "I want to get to the access road before we're out of flares." I looked at the fire. It was already starting to die at the edges where the wood was wet. I looked at the sled. Taylor's mouth was closed again. His eyes were still half open, staring at nothing. "We move," I said. Glenn stared at me for 3 seconds, then nodded once. Christina pulled her radio and keyed the mic. "Hughes to Marshall, do you copy?" Static. 2 bars. Then her own voice came back. Exact. Clean. No distortion. "Marshall, this is Hughes. Abandon the fire and move now. Coordinates confirmed. Ambulance is waiting." Christina lowered the radio and looked at Glenn. He stepped forward, took it from her hand, flipped it over, and ripped the battery out. The little rectangular pack came free with a plastic crack, and he threw it into the trees. "Hey," Christina started. "That wasn't dispatch," Glenn said. The fire collapsed in on itself. The center log split and the flames dropped to coals, hissing in the wet snow underneath. Smoke curled up thick and gray. "Go," Glenn said. I grabbed the sled rope and started running. Not a full sprint. I couldn't with the sled dragging behind me, but fast. Faster than I should have been moving on a night trail with 50 pounds of dead weight and uneven snow. Christina stayed close on my left, Glenn on my right. The fire disappeared behind us. The darkness came back. The tracks were still there, 6 feet to the left, keeping pace. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on the trail and my hand on the rope and my breath steady. My chest burned, my legs burned. The sled scraped and jerked, and I felt every root and rock through the harness clipped to my belt. We ran for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. Hard to tell. The trail bent left, then right, then straightened. The trees thinned slightly, and I thought I saw open space ahead. Then Glenn grabbed my shoulder and yanked me right, off the main trail onto a narrower fork I hadn't even seen. "Fire tower," he said. Christina didn't argue. We followed him up the incline, boots slipping on the slope, the sled dragging sideways and catching on every low branch. The trail got steeper. My lungs were screaming. I didn't stop. The tower appeared maybe 2 minutes later, old steel frame, maybe 60 feet tall, with a wooden platform at the top and a narrow zigzag staircase going up. The base was surrounded by deadfall and a rusted sign that said, "Closed, unsafe." "Up," Glenn said. Christina started climbing first. Her boots rang on the metal steps, loud and sharp. I unclipped from the sled harness and tied the rope to my belt instead, then started hauling it up hand over hand while I climbed. Taylor's body swung and bumped against the frame. I didn't look down. Glenn stayed on the landing below us. He pulled the last 3 white noise machines from his pack and set them on the platform in a triangle, all switched on. The hiss layered and swelled. I reached the top and pulled the sled up after me, dragging it over the edge of the platform. Christina was already at the far side, watching the trees. Then the metal banged, not wind, not settling. A sharp, deliberate strike from below, another bang, closer. I leaned over the railing and looked down. Something was climbing, not using the stairs, using the frame itself, pulling itself up hand over hand on the support beams. I saw an arm first, pale, too long. Fingers wrapped around the steel with no hesitation, no fumbling. Then another arm, moving fast, moving smooth. I grabbed the air horn from my belt and blasted it. The sound was huge, flat and metallic and wrong in the open air. The thing recoiled, one arm slipping, and I saw its face for half a second in my headlamp beam. Wrong. Just wrong. Too much movement under the skin. It dropped 10 feet, caught itself, and kept climbing. Its motion knocked the bottom machine loose. The black rectangle tumbled off the landing, and the hiss cut out. Then the second one went. Then the third. Silence. And then the voices came back. All of them. The crying, the laughter, Taylor's mumbling, my own voice giving coordinates, Christina's voice telling us to move. And behind me, close, right at my back, "Mom, please come home." Christina turned. I grabbed her jacket and yanked her back so hard she stumbled into me. She tried to pull free, but I held on. The thing came over the rail. It moved too fast. 1 second it was below. The next it was on the platform, crouched low with its arms bent wrong and its mouth open. That kid's voice was still coming out of it, still saying "Mom," in that soft, high tone. I threw the flare. I didn't crack it first. I just pulled it from Christina's belt and threw it as hard as I could. It hit the thing in the chest and went off on impact, red flame and smoke exploding across its torso. The voice cut off. It screamed instead, not one voice, all of them, layered and overlapping and breaking apart. It fell backward over the rail, and it grabbed the sled rope on the way down. The rope went taut, jerked, and Taylor's body slid across the platform toward the edge. I lunged for it, but I was too slow. The sled tipped, went over, and fell. The thing was still screaming. I leaned over and saw it hit the ground 60 feet below, flames spreading fast across its back and arms. It thrashed, rolled. The sled landed on top of it, and the impact drove it flat. The screaming got louder, then quieter, then stopped. The flames kept going. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, just breathing, watching the fire below. Glenn's forearm was burned. I noticed it when he leaned on the railing. The skin was red and blistered where the flare had bounced off the thing and caught him on the way past. "You good?" I asked. "Good enough," he said. We climbed down slow. Christina went first, testing every step. I followed. Glenn came last, favoring his burned arm, but not saying anything about it. At the bottom, we circled the wreckage. The thing was still burning, smaller now, collapsing in on itself. The smell was bad. Not quite meat, not quite chemical. Something else. Taylor's body was half buried under the sled frame. His face was gone. I didn't look too close. Christina pulled her radio. The battery was still missing, but she turned it over in her hands like she was checking for damage. Then she clipped it back to her belt and left it off. We walked out. It took 40 minutes to reach the trailhead. No voices, no tracks. Just snow and trees and our boots crunching. Jerry was waiting with the plow truck idling and the headlights on. He saw us coming and stepped out, his face going tight when he counted heads. 2 went in, he said. 1 came out, Christina said. Sort of. Jerry nodded. He didn't ask. Francis the dispatcher sent help. Ambulance, sheriff, DEC backup. They arrived 20 minutes later, and we gave statements. Christina did most of the talking. Fatal wildlife attack, emergency retreat, flare started fire during the extraction. The body couldn't be recovered safely in the dark. I filed my report the same way. Wildlife attack, defensive use of flares, victim deceased prior to reaching the access road. I left out the voices, left out the climbing, left out the thing that wasn't a moose or a bear or anything with a name I knew. Nobody asked. Maybe they didn't want to know. After that night, I stopped trusting radio certainty in dead zones. If a transmission comes through too clean, too fast, I don't follow it. I check twice. I wait for confirmation I can see, and I keep the air horn on my belt. Because the cost of being wrong already rode out on a rescue sled, and I'm not paying it again.